Genesis 35 opens with the patriarch Jacob standing under the heavy branches of an oak tree in the territory of Shechem, turning the dark soil with his own hands. He is not planting a seed, he is burying gods. Genesis 35, verses 2 through 4, records the quiet, urgent moment. Then Jacob said unto his household, and to all that were with him, put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments. And let us arise, and go up to Bethel. And they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand, and all their earrings which were in their ears. And Jacob hid them under the oak which was by Shechem. Stop right there. Look closely at the physical action in the verse. Jacob takes the physical idols, the heavy, carved figures of strange deities, and the metal earrings attached to them. He digs into the soil of a city that has just witnessed a horrific massacre. He places the objects into the earth. He covers them up. He does not burn them in a fire. He does not melt the gold down for his family's treasury. He does not shatter the wood or the stone with a hammer to prove their powerlessness. He hides them. Why did Jacob deliberately bury these specific objects under a lone oak tree in defiled dirt, instead of destroying them? And what dark spiritual contagion was he desperately sealing away before his family could survive the climb to Bethel? Picture it. The camp is in chaos. Fear is thick in the air. God has just commanded Jacob to move his entire household to Bethel, the house of God. But Jacob knows his family cannot make the holy ascent as they are. They are carrying a sickness. Something ancient and toxic has crossed the threshold of their tents. Most readers assume these strange gods are simply the household idols Rachel stole from her father Laban years earlier. A few wooden trinkets kept hidden in a camel's saddlebag. But the text does not say Rachel gave Jacob her gods. The King James is precise. The text says they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand. His entire household is suddenly infected with an overflow of foreign deities and heavy metal. Where did all this dark metal come from? To answer that, we have to look outside the standard narrative and open the Book of Jubilees, an ancient Jewish text preserved whole in the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible. Jubilees, specifically chapter 30, holds the hidden heavenly ledger behind this exact moment in Jacob's life. It pulls the curtain back on the blood-soaked dirt Jacob is standing on. Watch what the text does. The soil of Shechem is not just a convenient stopping point. It is a fresh crime scene. Just days before this burial, Jacob's sons Simeon and Levi drew their swords and slaughtered every male in the city of Shechem. Genesis 34 confirms they did not just kill the men. They took the spoil. They looted the houses, the altars, the bodies. They brought the wealth of a slaughtered Canaanite stronghold directly into the holy camp of Israel. Sit with that. The idols Jacob is burying are not old family heirlooms. They are the bloody, demonic plunder of a dead city. And the earrings attached to them are not simple jewelry. They are instruments of an ancient binding. Jacob is acting as a priest in a desperate panic, performing a ritual of quarantine to stop a spiritual plague from consuming his family from the inside out. But burying a god requires a specific kind of grave. The dirt alone is not enough to hold the contagion. Why did Jacob specifically choose the deep roots of a terebinth oak? And what is the Hebrew text hiding in the strange metal rings he threw into the earth with them? The dirt of Shechem is cold. Jacob is not just burying carved wood and chipped stone. He is burying metal. Heavy, forged metal. Genesis 35:4 says, And they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand, and all their earrings which were in their ears. Read that again. Gods and earrings. We skip over the jewelry. We assume Jacob is simply demanding modesty. a patriarch telling his household to dress down, to clean themselves up before they meet the Lord at Bethel. But you do not bury gold in a panic to teach a lesson in modesty. You bury it when the metal itself is infected. Look at the exact command in verse 2. Put away the strange gods that are among you. In Hebrew, the phrase translated as strange gods is Elohe HaNekar. Nekar does not just mean from another nation. It carries the weight of something alien, something deeply foreign, unfamiliar, and fundamentally hostile to the covenant. These are not passive statues. They are active spiritual anchors, and the earrings are the tethers. The Hebrew word for these rings is nezamim. To modernize, a ring is just an accessory, but in the ancient Near East, a nezam worn in the ear was an amulet. Throughout ancient Canaan and Mesopotamia, metal rings pressed against the skin were inscribed with the marks, symbols, and sigils of local deities. They were talismans, spells of protection, binding contracts. To wear the god's metal in your ear was to keep the god's voice close. It meant you submitted to their jurisdiction. The metal listened. The metal spoke. I offer this as the documented historical context of Canaanite metallurgy, not a modern invention. Test it the way the Bereans tested everything. In the ancient world, jewelry was religious technology, and Jacob's household is suddenly covered in it. The text says the rings were in their ears and the gods were in their hand. This is not Rachel's private, hidden secret anymore. The entire camp is infected. Jacob is acting as a priest. He rips the technology out of his camp. He is breaking ancient contracts. By throwing the nezamim into the earth alongside the Elohe HaNekar, he is physically severing the legal right of these entities to follow his family up the mountain to Bethel. God told him to build an altar. You do not bring a Canaanite tether to a holy altar, but a glaring problem remains. This is the chosen family. They have been walking under the covenant of Abraham and Isaac. Why is Jacob's camp suddenly overflowing with alien gods and occult amulets? The text says they handed over all the strange gods. The sheer volume implies a massive, immediate influx of pagan hardware. It is too much to be a slow accumulation of bad habits. This was a sudden, violent acquisition. The household didn't buy these amulets at a market. They pulled them from the dead. But to understand the true spiritual sickness coating this plunder, we have to rewind the clock just a few days. Where did this sudden avalanche of defiled metal come from? 3 days after the circumcision. The air in Shechem is thick with flies and the smell of copper. 2 brothers walk through a dead city. Simeon and Levi are not moving as patriarchs today. They are moving as butchers. Genesis 34 records the aftermath of their sister Dinah's defilement. Verses 27 through 29 outline the true cost of their revenge. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and spoiled the city because they had defiled their sister. They took their sheep and their oxen and their asses, and that which was in the city, and that which was in the field, and all their wealth, and all their little ones, and their wives took they captive, and spoiled even all that was in the house. Stop right there. Look at the final clause. Spoiled even all that was in the house. We read this as a standard ancient military victory. The taking of physical assets. But what was inside a Canaanite house in the Bronze Age? It was not just grain and linen. The center of every ancient home was the domestic shrine, the teraphim, the household deities. When Simeon and Levi dragged the wealth of Shechem out the doors, they did not sort the holy from the profane. They stripped the altars. They stripped the bodies. Picture it. The sons of Israel returning to Jacob's camp, their arms heavy with plunder, dropping bags of carved metal and stone onto the dirt. This is the missing link. This is the sudden, violent influx of defiled metal that triggers the panic in the very next chapter. The strange gods Jacob desperately buries under the oak in Genesis 35 are not a quiet collection of Laban's stolen trinkets. They are the bloody, looted idols of a slaughtered Canaanite stronghold. And remember the earrings, the nezamim, the tethers of the gods. Where did a sudden surplus of pagan jewelry come from? Genesis 34 says they took the women captive. They took the wives of the dead men of Shechem into their own tents. The earrings came with them. The amulets were still in their flesh. The demonic contracts were still active. Same soil, different story. We usually read the massacre of Shechem as a tragedy of human violence. But look at the physical inventory. It was a spiritual heist. Israel's camp is now an unauthorized holding cell for Canaanite deities. Think of the Book of Joshua, centuries later. One man, Achan, takes a single accursed Babylonian garment and a wedge of gold from the ashes of Jericho, and the entire nation of Israel is paralyzed by the contagion. Here, the patriarchs themselves have taken the accursed objects of an entire city. I offer this as one reading of the timeline, tracing the physical objects from one chapter directly into the next. But the canonical narrative is unbroken. The slaughter ends chapter 34. The command from God to run to Bethel opens chapter 35. The contamination is immediate, and Jacob's command to bury the gods is the frantic response of a father trying to stop a plague. He knows what his sons have done. He knows the gold is screaming. But the dirt of Canaan is not the only place where this crime is being processed. Up above the terebinth oak, beyond the physical borders of Jacob's camp, the massacre of Shechem triggered an immediate, documented response in the unseen realm. The physical plunder was gathered on earth, but what was being written down in the heavenly ledger while Simeon and Levi swung their swords? Look up from the dirt of Shechem. While Jacob is staring at the heavy bags of looted metal, on the floor of his tent, a different record is being written in the unseen realm. Jubilees chapter 30 shifts the camera away from the blood in the streets and opens the books of heaven. The text reveals that the massacre in the valley was not just a chaotic, earthly revenge plot. It triggered an immediate, high-level angelic accounting. According to Jubilees, the defilement of Dinah and the sudden, violent response of Simeon and Levi was recorded directly into the heavenly tablets by the angels of the presence. Stop right there. Jubilees frames the events at Shechem as ground zero for a specific kind of ancient contagion. The unnatural mixing of the holy line with the defiled, idolatrous nations. The text warns that whoever brings the abomination of the Canaanites into the tents of Israel invites the immediate, devastating wrath of the Lord. The angels are actively writing down the boundary lines of what is holy and what is cursed. I hold this as their telling, one tradition's record of the unseen war behind the text. Test it the way the Bereans tested everything. But watch how it illuminates Jacob's absolute panic. Go back to the canonical text. Genesis 34-30. Jacob turns to Simeon and Levi in the immediate aftermath of the slaughter, staring at the wealth of the dead city they have dragged home. He says, "Ye have troubled me to make me to stink among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And I, being few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me, and slay me. And I shall be destroyed, I and my house." The English says troubled me. The Hebrew is akar. It does not mean you have caused me a political headache. It means to cause severe taboo, to bring absolute ruin, to invoke a curse. It is the exact same, highly specific word used centuries later in the Book of Joshua, when a man named Achan brings a single accursed Babylonian idol and a wedge of gold into the holy camp of Israel, paralyzing the entire nation. Akar. Jacob is not just worried about an earthly Canaanite army retaliating. He knows a spiritual curse has just crossed his threshold. Read his desperate command in Genesis 35:2 again. Put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments. Be clean. The Hebrew word is tahar. It does not mean to take a bath and wash the physical dirt off your hands. It is a severe priestly word. It means to undergo a strict ritual purification to remove a deep, unseen defilement. It is the word the priests of Leviticus use for cleansing a leper, or for a man who has touched a rotting corpse. See the scene. The sons of Israel are standing there, their garments literally soaked in the blood of Shechem, their hands full of the Elohe Hanekah, the strange gods, and the heavy metal nezamim. The angels of the presence in Jubilees are watching the camp. The heavenly ledger is open. God's wrath against the idolatry of Canaan is an established, terrifying law, and now, the very gods he condemned to destruction are sitting inside the tents of his chosen patriarch. The contagion is not just physical, it is legal. By taking the gods of Shechem as plunder, the sons of Israel have inadvertently transferred the spiritual debt of a dead city onto themselves. The metal amulets are still legally bound to the unseen entities of Canaan. If Jacob does not sever this legal claim immediately, the angels recording the massacre will have to record the infection of Israel. He has to bury the metal before the plague hits. The ledger in heaven demands a separation, and Jacob is out of time. But what exactly was living inside those carved wooden figures and heavy gold rings? What ancient, pre-flood sickness was Jacob actually pulling out of his family's hands? Look inside the tents of Israel at Shechem. The bags of looted idols sit heavy on the woven rugs. Jacob is staring down at the Elohe Hanekah, the strange gods. He is realizing the camp is not just dirty, it is infected. What exactly was living inside a Canaanite idol? To answer that, you have to look ahead in the canonical text. Psalm 106, verses 37 and 38, drops a terrifying diagnosis of the unseen powers operating in this exact region. Yea, they sacrificed their sons and their daughters unto devils, and shed innocent blood, whom they sacrificed unto the idols of Canaan. And the land was polluted with blood. Stop right there. Devils, not myths, not empty carved wood. The Hebrew word is Shechem. They are territorial entities, and according to the biblical text, they demand and feed on human blood. Now look back at what just happened in Genesis 34. Simeon and Levi did not just win a political skirmish. They butchered an entire city. They drenched the valley of Shechem in blood. The massacre did not just empty the houses. It fed the land's unseen masters. And then the sons of Israel picked up the altars. Picture it. They carried those fully awakened, blood-fed objects back into their own bedrooms. The nezamim, the amulets, are still pressed into the flesh of the captive Canaanite women walking into the camp. The contagion is physically inside the holy line. Where did these Shechem come from, and why are they so deeply tied to metal and stone? This is where First Enoch, an ancient Jewish writing preserved whole in the Ethiopian Bible, fills in the dark prehistory of the Canaanite altars. Enoch chapter 19 records that the spirits of the fallen watchers and their dead, disembodied giant offspring did not just vanish in the flood. They became the unseen parasites of the ancient world. Enoch warns that these entities, assuming many different forms, shall lead mankind astray, into sacrificing to demons as gods. I hold this as their telling, not as proven fact. Test it the way the Bereans tested everything. But watch how it locks the biblical scene together. The sickness Jacob is fighting is an ancient, pre-flood rebellion. The teraphim are the housing units. The nezamim earrings are the physical tethers. By taking the spoil of Shechem, Simeon and Levi have inadvertently dragged the architects of the ancient world's ruin directly into the tents of the man chosen to bless the earth. The angels of the presence are watching. The ledger is open. The wrath is imminent. Read Genesis 35:4 again. And they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand. Jacob demands the extraction. He does not delegate this. He acts as the priest. He takes the heavy, infected metal into his own hands. He is holding the contagion. He knows these objects cannot stay in the tents, and they absolutely cannot travel up the mountain to the house of God at Bethel. But you do not just toss a demon-haunted idol into an open ditch. You cannot burn it, or the molten gold will just be remade into a new idol. It must be locked away. It must be bound. Jacob walks out of the camp, carrying the weight of a slaughtered city in his arms. He bypasses the fire. He bypasses the forge. He heads toward a very specific, singular landmark, towering over the valley of Shechem. The patriarch is about to use the geography of Canaan against the gods of Canaan. But why did Jacob choose to bury the sickness beneath the deep roots of one specific ancient tree? The wind through the valley of Shechem is dead. Jacob walks away from the tents of Israel, carrying the weight of the slaughtered city in a heavy sack. He does not stop at a cave. He does not build a furnace. He walks directly toward a massive, sprawling root system tearing through the soil. Genesis 35:4 states the final destination of the contagion, and Jacob hid them under the oak which was by Shechem. Stop right there. Why an oak? And why this specific location? If you are trying to dispose of demonic hardware, a shallow grave under a random tree seems reckless. But Jacob is not acting recklessly. He is acting with severe, calculated precision. The English calls it an oak, but the Hebrew word here is elah, often translated as the terebinth tree. In the ancient Near East, an elah was not just timber. It was architecture. Picture it. The terebinth grows massive, its roots plunging deep into the bedrock, its canopy wide and dark. For centuries before Jacob arrived, the Canaanites used these specific trees as open-air temples. Look at the prophet Hosea, centuries later, describing the exact geographic mechanics of Canaanite idolatry in Hosea 4:13. They sacrifice upon the tops of the mountains and burn incense upon the hills, under oaks and poplars and elms, because the shadow thereof is good. The tree was the sanctuary. The roots were the gateway to the underworld. Jacob is not just hiding the metal so his sons cannot find it. He is burying the teraphim and the binding nezamim amulets directly inside the ritual epicenter of the very gods he is trying to banish. He is returning the entities to their own jurisdiction. This is one reading, not the final word, but watch how it aligns the geography with the spirit realm. By placing the idols of Shechem under the elah of Shechem, Jacob is executing a profound legal maneuver. He is stating, before the watching angels holding the heavenly ledger, that this metal belongs to the soil of Canaan. It does not belong to the bloodline of Abraham. He digs down into the dirt, pushing the carved faces and the heavy gold rings deep into the tangled, twisting roots of the terebinth. He lets the earth of Shechem swallow the gods of Shechem. The root system becomes a lock. The burial is a formal, priestly quarantine. By physically severing the amulets from the flesh of his household and burying them in the enemy's own sacred ground, Jacob breaks the legal tether. The Shechem, the territorial spirits feeding on the blood of the massacre, are suddenly trapped under the wood. They are bound to the dirt. They cannot follow the family. The path to the altar is finally clear, but there is a terrifying, immediate consequence to this burial. Jacob's family is now ceremonially clean, but they are still heavily outnumbered, surrounded by Canaanite strongholds who just watched Simeon and Levi annihilate one of their own. Jacob just buried the gods of the land. Earthly retaliation should be swift, brutal, and total. Instead, the exact moment the metal goes into the dirt, the atmosphere over the entire region violently shifts. The sword of Israel is put away, but a different kind of weapon descends on the surrounding cities. What exactly hit the Canaanite warlords the second the roots covered the heavy gold? The last handful of dirt falls. The roots of the terebinth are covered. The strange gods are sealed. But Jacob is still standing in the middle of a war zone. He has a small camp, a handful of sons, herds of slow-moving cattle, and a camp full of captive women. And he is surrounded by the Canaanite and Perizzite warlords, who just watched Simeon and Levi annihilate one of their allied cities. Genesis 35:5 records the exact moment the family finally turns their backs on the slaughter. And they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were round about them, and they did not pursue after the sons of Jacob. Stop right there. The terror of God. The English translation sounds like a poetic way to describe a bad fright, but the Hebrew text uses a highly specific, devastating term, chitath Elohim. Chitath does not mean nervousness. It means a shattering, a crushing, paralyzing dread that breaks the mind before a single sword is drawn. Read that again. They did not pursue. They had the numbers. They had the weapons. They had the ultimate motive. In the ancient Near East, blood vengeance was not a choice. It was a cultural law. The kings of the surrounding hills should have descended on Jacob's slow-moving caravan and wiped the seed of Abraham from the face of the earth, but they couldn't move. Why? Because the unseen war had just been won in the dirt under the oak tree. Picture it. The kings standing on the ridges overlooking the valley. They are holding their weapons, but a heavy, unnatural panic is crushing the breath out of their lungs. The moment Jacob pulled the nezamim amulets from his family's flesh and pushed the Elohe HaNekar into the roots of the elah, a spiritual shockwave hit the region. Think of the Canaanite woman Rahab, generations later in Joshua chapter 2, describing this exact same supernatural phenomenon to the Hebrew spies. Your terror is fallen upon us, and all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you. Same crushing dread, same paralysis. The physical enemies faint because their unseen masters have already been routed. I hold this as their telling, tracing the unseen mechanics behind the canonical verse. Test it the way the Bereans tested everything. But look at the sequence of the soil. The surrounding Canaanites drew their power, their protection, and their confidence from their territorial entities, the Shechem, the ancient gods of the land. But a single Hebrew patriarch had just walked into their sacred space, taken the bloody, blood-fed idols of a slaughtered stronghold and buried them alive. Jacob stripped their air support. When the Canaanite armies looked down at the camp of Israel, they did not just see a few shepherds packing their tents. They saw a family that had just conquered their gods. The Chitath Elohim fell on them because the demonic infrastructure holding up their cities had just been legally bound and neutralized beneath the soil of Shechem. The sickness was quarantined. The angels holding the heavenly ledger, documented in Jubilees, closed the books on the massacre. The wrath of God that was hovering over Israel was diverted, and the terrifying weight of the unseen realm was dropped onto the enemies of the covenant instead. The road up the mountain was suddenly wide open. The family begins the long, steep climb to Bethel, to the house of God. They are ceremonially clean. They have changed their garments. The gold rings are gone. The bloody wooden faces are left behind them. But the story does not end at the holy altar of Bethel. Because Jacob did not destroy the strange gods, he only hid them. The terebinth tree was a heavy lock, but it was not a furnace. The metal was still in the dirt. And centuries later, that exact same patch of soil in Shechem is going to crack open again. What happened to the buried sickness when the roots of the oak finally died? Centuries pass. The terebinth tree grows old. The roots thicken and twist in the deep dark of Shechem, holding tightly to the heavy gold and carved wood of the slaughtered city. Jacob is long dead. His sons are dead. The tribes of Israel have gone down into Egypt, suffered under the whip of Pharaoh, crossed the sea, and finally returned to the land of Canaan. And in the final chapter of the Book of Joshua, an old, battle-scarred commander gathers the entire nation of Israel together for one final charge before he dies. Watch where he takes them. Joshua chapter 24. He does not gather them at Jerusalem. He does not gather them at Shiloh. He marches the tribes directly into the valley of Shechem. And watch what he demands in verse 23. "Now, therefore, put away," said he, "the strange gods which are among you, and incline your heart unto the Lord God of Israel." Stop right there. Put away the strange gods. It is the exact same command, in the exact same valley, spoken over the exact same bloodline. But look at where Joshua formally seals this renewed covenant. Verse 26 says Joshua took a great stone and set it up there under an oak. That was by the sanctuary of the Lord. Same dirt, same tree. The English says an oak. The Hebrew is the elah, a variation of the elah, the terebinth. Joshua takes a massive, heavy stone and drives it into the earth directly over the root system of the very tree where his ancestor Jacob buried the demonic plunder of Genesis 34. Jacob locked the contagion in the dirt. Joshua places a stone of witness over the vault. This is one reading, not the final word. I offer it as that. One careful bridge between the canonical texts and the ancient ledgers. But sit with the unbroken geography of this passage. The biblical writers are not giving you random coordinates. They are mapping a multi-generational war over a specific spiritual gateway. Go back now to the quiet, terrifying scene where this film began. Genesis 35. A patriarch standing under the heavy branches of the oak, his hands covered in the soil of Shechem. The bloody idols and the binding nezamim amulets spread out on the ground beside him. You have read this story a dozen times and assumed it was just a father telling his family to clean up their act. A little spring cleaning before a religious festival. But tonight, the dirt is different. You know the blood that coated that metal. You know the dark, pre-flood sickness living inside the wood, recorded in Enoch and Jubilees. You know that Jacob was not just being careful. He was acting as a priest in a desperate panic, intercepting a deadly legal claim before the angels of the presence could write the ruin of his family into the heavenly ledger. He used the earth of Canaan to swallow the gods of Canaan. He buried the sickness so his family could survive the climb to Bethel. But the desert is still holding the rest of the mystery. The terebinth tree eventually died. The wood of the idols eventually rotted into dust. But gold does not rot. The heavy metal rings, the inscribed amulets, the demonic tethers Simeon and Levi pulled. From the flesh of a slaughtered city, they are still there, buried somewhere deep in the bedrock of the valley today. The land remembers exactly what it swallowed. If you made it to the end of this study, comment the word "watched" below so I know who is tracking these texts with me. Subscribe to the channel and send this video to one person who loves the book of Genesis but has never heard the dark truth about what Jacob actually buried at Shechem. The path to the house of God always begins with what you are willing to leave in the dirt.